Please welcome to the stage Father Michael Quinn.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, Supervisor, distinguished guests, Chief Nicholson, Chief Scott, and all the wonderful people of San Francisco and the people from surrounding areas who are here on this wonderful day to ask God's blessing and to really recognize that we have indeed received God's blessing, however we name our God, since that terrible day that we can remember as the Loma Prieta earthquake, 5:04 on October 17th, 1989. Those of us who were around at those times remember that there was a moment where we didn't know what to do. The bridges were closed. It seemed like we were really adrift. And then what happened is God's Spirit, the God within us, took over. And what happened is the communities came together. And the communities came together to not only address the immediate issues, but the more far-reaching issues. Example, the San Francisco Interfaith Council was founded as a consequence. Can you imagine that? All of our faiths decided maybe we should work together as the community of San Francisco and work together. Thank you, God, for it had to ring the bell a little loud, but we got it. Thank you for the first responders, many of whom risked their lives. Thank you also for the individuals who are not first responders, but who stepped out. And then again, they let God work best in them. We have been blessed since that time with the divine intervention of our God. And our God has given us civic leaders who make sure that our homes are safe. We continue to ask the divine intervention of that God to give us leaders to provide for emergency services, to provide for the welfare and the well-being of the citizens and the guests of the city of San Francisco. And we thank God for their continued vigilance to be prepared for all those occasions. May God keep us all safe, and may the next 30 years be safer than it was 30 years ago on this date. And now I have the quite a great privilege of introducing Mayor London Breed, a fellow San Franciscan.
Thank you, Father Quinn, and thank you so much to everyone who is joining us here today to celebrate really how far we've come over the past 30 years. And I remember that day. I was actually a freshman in high school, attending Galileo High School right here in this neighborhood, and it almost feels like it was yesterday. We know that 30 years ago, the Loma Prieta earthquake struck suddenly, and even though it only lasted for 15 seconds, its impacts were tremendous. 12,000 homes damaged, billions of dollars of property damage all over the Bay Area, and sadly, 67 lives lost before their time. We've come a long way, and we know that there have been significant changes in San Francisco. We all remember the Embarcadero Freeway. It's no longer there. Hayes Valley and the Central Freeway, and we have some Hayes Valley folks here with us today. It's now this beautiful, vibrant, open space. Buildings in the Civic Center that have been rehabbed to seismic standards. And of course, so many people who live in the marina. You remember the devastation that existed here, which is why it was so important that this city implement soft story legislation to ensure that when the next earthquake hits our city, we are more resilient, we are more prepared than we were back then. Now, we all know that we can't prevent an earthquake from happening, but in this city, we have taken the lessons learned from what we know happened. Now, that was a time where technology was a lot different. We didn't have many cell phones and smartphones and other communication devices. In fact, and those of you who were there probably remember when it happened. I ran outside. I was on Webster Street between Fulton and McAllister at a friend's house. I felt the ground shake. It had been almost like it had turned upside down. And then we immediately all just ran outside and was like, what happened? What happened? And we didn't really understand what was going on. We heard the Bay Bridge collapse. We heard this was going on. There was so much information. Didn't have access to electricity. We relied on our radios and we relied on communication from others. But more importantly, we were safe because we knew that so many of our first responders, from the police department, from the fire department, they were out there in the communities checking and making sure that our communities were safe. And so we are so grateful that they continue to be there for us time and time again. And I also want to send a special shout out to NERT, to the Neighborhood Emergency Response Team and the volunteers and the work that you all do, because we know when disaster strikes that our public safety officials may not be able to get to everyone right away. So we're going to need to look out for one another. Over the years, we have really worked hard to build more resilient communities. Communities where neighbors know what to do, where they look out for one another, so that we are the first responders when our fellow neighbor needs us during these times, so that we can continue to keep one another safe and provide support during what we know could be a problematic time in our city. We've come a long way, and we're still standing, stronger and more amazing than ever. San Francisco, as we know, even with its challenges, is still one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And we will continue to make sure that we make good policy decisions, good investments, and continue to work with all community members throughout San Francisco to make sure we are all safe. Today, we remember that we have come further in this past 30 years in being a more resilient, a more seismically safe, a better city, so that when the next one happens, we are prepared. So I want to thank all of you for being here today to really mark this occasion. And I also want to take the opportunity to suggest that you think about your emergency preparedness kits. You go to sf72.org. It has recommendations of things that you could use in one of those kits that would last for 72 hours. I was with some kids today at Rosa Parks Middle School, and they were telling me what I needed to put in my kit. And I thought, wow, we're preparing the next generation, and they are now going to be the ambassadors for their families and for their communities, so that we can all look out for one another and to make sure that people are safe and that our city is better and stronger than ever. Thank you all again so much for being here to celebrate.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Catherine Stephanie. I'm the supervisor for District 2, and it is such an honor and a privilege to serve District 2. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Mayor Breed, for your remarks. Obviously, we're here today to commemorate 30-year anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, which in just 15 seconds rocked our community. And I can't believe it was only 15 seconds, because when somebody asked me the other day how long I thought it was, I said at least a minute. And when someone told me it was just 15 seconds, it truly was probably the longest 15 seconds of my life. We know that it took the lives of 67 neighbors and caused over $5 billion in damage. It is of course fitting that we are here in the Marina, a neighborhood which suffered some of the most extensive damage. The headline of the Examiner, in fact, the following day read, "SF Marina Devastated." In this neighborhood, gas mains and pipes burst, sparking fires, causing buildings to collapse, and killing 4 people. I was actually a junior in college. I was in my dorm room at St. Mary's College in Moraga, just across the Bay Bridge, when the earthquake struck. And my friends and I, you know, we heard about what to do in an earthquake, and of course when it hits, all of a sudden all of that goes out the window, and what we did is what you're not supposed to do. We started running. And we ran outside to find a chaotic scene. All of the windows in our library had been blown out. People were panicking. And I was personally touched because my roommate at the time had her little brother here in San Francisco who was recovering from leukemia and was in one of the hospitals here in San Francisco. And we did not know whether or not the hospital was okay, whether or not he was okay. And of course we were hearing things like the Bay Bridge collapsed, and based on how bad that earthquake felt, we pictured the entire Bay Bridge in the Bay because it felt like that actually could have happened. And what we learned from this experience really is the importance of having a plan in place and being prepared ahead of time. We know that every household should have an earthquake safety kit and a plan for what to do in the event of an earthquake. And having these important conversations now will make us safer in the event of another big one. And just this Monday, we had a small earthquake of 4.7, a reminder that we must always be prepared, and a reminder that we must talk about this with our children. My daughter, Gigi, who's 10 years old, had just fallen asleep in bed next to me and was jolted awake, sending her sharp elbow directly into my jaw and making me, I think, perhaps the only injury of the earthquake that night. But really, you know, that was my daughter's first time experiencing an earthquake, and it was truly scary for her. She had a lot of questions about what would happen if the earthquake had been bigger, and she was so on edge that she really couldn't go back to sleep. So I told her, you know, we turn that nervousness into awareness. We become aware of what we can be doing, and then we turn that awareness into preparedness. We're having important conversations about what to do in case of an earthquake, what our family disaster plan is, and where we keep our emergency supplies. I hope that today, on the 30-year anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, families across the city are having similar conversations about how to be prepared. We do not know, of course, when the next big one will strike, but we must do everything we can as a city to make sure that our residents and businesses are as prepared as possible. I'm proud to have co-sponsored the Earthquake Safety and Emergency Response Bond that will be on the ballot in March. And if passed, it will provide over $600 million in much-needed funding for capital improvements to critical infrastructure, including neighborhood fire stations, district police stations, the emergency firefighter water system, and other essential facilities and infrastructure. I'm also excited to announce today my Resilient District 2 program, which started here with the Resource Fair this afternoon. I'll be working with neighborhood leaders, and I want to thank all our neighborhood leaders. So many are out here, and without you, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Thank you so much for how you participate. I'm looking at you, Gail. And Patricia and Jim and so many people, Jason that I saw when I walked in, Alan, Kat. There are so many people in this neighborhood that rise to the occasion and really help us do what we need to do to be prepared. So I want to thank everyone who has joined us today. I look forward to continuing our work to be as prepared as possible for the next earthquake. And I also want to thank our first responders. I have so much respect for all of you, all of our police officers, all of our firefighters. What would we do without you? You are amazing, especially here in San Francisco. And with that, I would like to call up San Francisco Battalion Chief Peratley.
It's dangerous to give me an open mic. I know I have limited time. I am a talker. Anyway, it's an honor to be here today. 30 years ago, Deputy Chief Wersch and myself, we were probies. We didn't even earn probie status. We were in the fire academy, and at 5:04 we were being dismissed. And in the yard, you always had to run in the yard unless you were doing a training thing. So we were all running towards that 7-story, at the time was a brick building, and I saw it going back and forth, swaying and swaying, and then all of a sudden you started swaying, and the captain told us to hit the ground, cover your head, and we didn't even know what hit us, and then we realized, and it was going on for a long time, right, Chief? It really was. So I mean, it's my anniversary. It's 30-year anniversary, but I mean, we've been doing this for years, no matter where we are, what municipality, what country, we're there for every disaster. And it was amazing. Later on, I went home quickly, checked on my dog, who was hiding, who never did that. I made sure she was all right, went back to Station 7, and I said, you know, I'm just a probie, can I answer phones? They go, answer phones, get on the rig. So I got on the rig. I didn't even have a turnout coat. I just put on some old-timers turnout. We went through South of Market, the entire South of Market. They had their horrible collapse on Biloxim Street, but the entire South of Market smelled like natural gas. And it was really an eerie feeling. Then we swooped into the marina where I was dropped off, and we have a very special guest in a little later that's going to tell, hopefully, his story. But I was dropped off at the marina, and basically what I did was help expand the auxiliarized portable hydrant system you see right here. Because when they opened the hydrant in the marina, which was a disaster area, it was several square blocks of houses leaning, garages buckling, and then that dramatic 3-story building that ended up in the intersection where the big rescue was. When they opened up the hydrant, it just dripped out. So one of our chiefs at the time invented this system, and we've had the auxiliarized system since 1915, but he invented the portable hydrant system. So that beautiful fireboat out there was an older one, pumped from the bay into a manifold, and we were able to create a hydrant system to put that fire out. Basically, I just moved hose, and that's what I did. But hopefully he'll come up at some point. But he did a terrific rescue while I was moving hose. He was crawling in 35 feet into a dilapidated building, barely shoulder space, with a chainsaw. Meanwhile, aftershocks were going on. It smelled of natural gas. He hears a woman calling, yelling for help. He's making his way, cutting piece by piece, trying to shore up for his own safety, getting in there. He gets close to her, and then finally, I think it's the blade that went, or he had to get something, a new chainsaw. She was so scared that he was going to leave and not come back, and he promised her. And that's a promise we keep, he kept, and that's a promise we keep to you when we swear in. We will be there. And he showed that hand raised, like true colors. He got back in there, cut more away, and got her out. And he saved her life. And he's gotten so many awards for that, so many accolades. But the truth of the matter, it's a two-way street with the community and us. She saved his life. She taught him about better things, how to live better, how to live more sound, and how to live more peaceful. They became friends for the rest of her life, and he'll carry that in his heart. Anyway, I'm just going to get a little corny for a minute. My dad's not alive anymore, but he was so proud that his daughter went to that fire, because that was my first fire, and somehow I ended up in Sports Illustrated. Okay, you know this is old because there's a Marlboro ad at the back of the, okay? All right, so, you know, I am a ham, but who knew I was going to be in Sports Illustrated? Okay. All right, so the next day we went down there and worked at the marina. My dad walks into Time Warner building in Manhattan, because he's a Mr. Manhattan himself, and he goes, that's my daughter, that's my daughter. And they're like, yeah, whatever, you know. And he goes, let me get my boss down. So some boss comes down, he goes, come back in a week. And they blew up a big poster of that picture. So anyway, Dad, we did it together. And he actually was the one that called and told me the Bay Bridge class, because remember we had a power flare earlier. None of us had phones, and you know, he called on a landline. Remember that landline? Who's got a landline here? Oh, excellent. This is pretty good. But on the more serious end, enough with this. I know that our whole careers we've been training and trying to improve. And I know Chief Nicholson, that's one of her big agendas, to improve our disaster plan. And it really is the birth of the NERT organization, because it was amazing to see civilians and fire and anybody moving hose to get that system up and running, because the marina was so full of natural gas and we've already had an explosion. It was really incredible. And I love working with NERT now and training with them and practicing. So we're here for you. We always will be. And we love San Francisco. And we are going to pay tribute to the seriousness of what happened that day. but we're also celebrating an earthquake. It's just amazing what San Francisco does. We come out for everything. Anyway, we love you, and we do. When we raise our hand, we really mean it. It's a two-way street. I'm going to introduce Jim Maxwell. You got a few things to say, huh?
Good afternoon. Just wanted to really briefly thank the mayor and Supervisor Stephanie for putting this event on. It's so important that we continue to remember that 30 years ago, this city and our neighborhood were rocked. We were in shock, but it really galvanized us as a community to come together. As we've heard, NERT was born out of this event, and that people came together and worked together side by side with fire to help put out the fires. And we're really pleased that we're starting our resiliency D2 effort, because it's that tenacity and the resiliency that's going to make us strong and be able to bounce back the next time we have to face such an event. I also want to say it's also important that as communities we come together, that we all know each other. These events are great. We need to have more community events where you get to know your neighbors. Make an effort to say hello to a friend. Make an effort to get to know your local merchants as well, because our merchant corridors need to be resilient, because they're the ones that are going to be providing for us in the next big event. And I think everyone remembers how they didn't have power or anything else either, but a lot of them banded together and somehow provided food, they provided water, they provided a place for us to gather. And we need to remember that going forward as we move forward. We've been working on a little neighborhood, actually it's not going to be in the neighborhood now, but it's a memorial to the Loma Prieta earthquake. And that's close to happening. That's been 15 years, a grassroots sort of effort. Gail Goldine, John Farrell, Kit Haskell, retired firefighter Dennis Kennedy, a number of folks have been involved in putting that together. And that's finally going to happen down at Pier 22.5 at Station 35. Which is appropriate since it's also to honor the fireboat Phoenix that was instrumental in putting out the fires here. But as we were putting that together and artists were talking to neighbors, one of the things that came out of a few community meetings that I remember very specifically was everybody's remembrance of that was there was the earthquake, there was the event, and after that there was this immediate silence that sort of descended on the city, on the neighborhood, as everyone took stock of their surroundings and what was going on. And it was at that point that a lot of neighbors wandered out of their homes, looked to their other neighbors who they possibly hadn't even met before, and said, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Is everybody okay? And that connection was made. We need to keep those connections strong so we can be resilient for our next event. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, our plan was to have enough speeches until we could get to 5:04 p.m., but clearly we didn't have a lot of politicians speaking today. So we're gonna have a fireboat display from the San Francisco Fire Department. There we go. If you look to your right, you can see it. Some of us also remember that there was a World Series game going on between the Giants and the A's. Yeah, if he wants to say a few words, yeah.
Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's get him right over to.
Yeah, come on up, Chief.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janine Nicholson. I'm the chief of the San Francisco Fire Department, and thank you very much. And when Battalion Chief Anita Prattley was speaking, she was speaking about a retired firefighter named Jerry Shannon. Many of you have probably seen him in the newspaper of late. He saved a woman named Shara Cox here in the marina, and thankfully Jerry has showed up today, and welcome, and we all look up to you. Say a couple words?
Yes. I'm flattered by all what's gone on since the earthquake, and especially immediately thereafter. And I want to take this chance to talk about something that I begged these reporters to pass on, and they would promise me they would, and it never happened. I didn't do this rescue. The fire department did this rescue. And the people are out there in the rescue squads. I was a mediocre fireman. These guys are trained way above my pay grade. And what they do on a daily basis, we're an insurance policy for the citizens of San Francisco. And it's no big thing when you wreck your car and your insurance company comes and takes care of it. But when the fire department does it, for some reason, the bond that we had since 1906 with the citizens of San Francisco, they feel about us as we feel about them. It's not just a job. And the dedication I'd never seen. Do you realize 264 guys, people, drove back into the city immediately after the quake? They weren't on duty and they weren't getting paid. What other department in San Francisco can say that? These guys came in, left their families, didn't know what they were going into, which you never do when you respond to an incident. And they came back into the city and they worked for 72 hours, and they didn't get any accolades. They didn't get any newspaper print. They did it because of the love of the city and the love of the job. I was so proud when they pinned that badge on me in 1970 that I wanted to honor it and do something to think that I deserved it. And I still, when I see these red rigs with that gold seal on it, get that same feeling in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you can see, the fireboat display to your right. Now, that's not the Phoenix. That's the other one, right? That's the St. Francis, named for our great city. So I want to ask Chief Nicholson and Chief Scott to join me up on the stage. Supervisor Stephanie. Yeah, we are. Few more minutes. Any police officers got a story out there?
Hey, Vic, you got a story?
This is Chief Blackburn, who invented the portable hydrant system.
Oh, come on up.
Chief Blackburn.
Come on up, Chief Blackburn. You got 3 minutes.
3 minutes, that's it.
Germany to be here for this.
So glad to have you.
You want me to say a few words?
Yeah, just say a few words about the system you invented.
Okay, it's an honor to be here today, 30 years after the Loma Prieta quake. Hard to believe it goes by so fast. And I want to echo what Jerry Shannon said about the fire department. And I want to point out to you what happened in '89. We had a great fire chief, Emmett Condon, who was on the Seismic Safety Commission. He understood the earthquake risk and weather for the fire department, supported development of new equipment that we could get, and we had Mayor Dianne Feinstein. We had a meeting with her, with Dr. Scawthorne, and explained to her what the risks were, the equipment we needed at that time, the portable water system, and a bond issue. And Mayor Feinstein totally understood. It was a classic meeting. We went in and we were told we had 20 minutes. 3 hours later, we left her office. We had a $50 million bond issue, special appropriation for the portable water system, and the words just go to work. So we did that, and I just want to point out to you the dedication of the firemen, like Jerry said, is amazing. It's hard work. We developed a portable water system, worked with the fireboat, a lot of training, and when '89 came, we were ready. We had a plan, And I'd like to point out to you what happens in an earthquake like what happened in '89. We lost all electric power in the city for 3 full days. The earthquake hit, events all over the city. Just in the marina alone, we had 127 water main breaks, so we lost all water in the marina. Fire breaks out, and we say in the fire department parlance, when all hell breaks loose, nobody else knows what to do, they call the fire department. But an earthquake is the extreme example of that, and we have to perform. And what happened, so all water's gone, and only because the Goodyear blimp was in town because of the World Series did the fire department know that he even had a fire from Central Fire Alarm. They sent the chief down there, his name is Harry Brophy. He had had a drill with the portable water system 1 week before, so he knew exactly what to do. Called the fireboat, the portable water system, and they got there about 40 minutes later. Had we had this wind today, what we had then, we would have stopped the fire at Van Ness Avenue. Give you an example of what would happen. But that day there was no wind. It was unbelievable, and a good fortune for all of us. A lot of hard work. Once the rigs got here, they knocked the fire down. First the radiant heat, then he attacked the building. And training, having the equipment available, having the mayor and everybody behind the fire department, and it all came together that day. And I can tell you, it was a proud day for the San Francisco Fire Department, and also for the people that came in on the off-duty guys, and it all worked out good. And for all of us that were there that day, we're proud of what happened, and we did the best we could under the circumstances, and it all worked out. So here we are today. Thank you very much.
Right on time.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. Hi, Chief. Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Again, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today to commemorate this 30-year anniversary of Loma Prieta. We honor the men and women of the San Francisco Police and Fire Department that have put their lives on the line year after year in this city to keep us all safe. Today, as a reminder of our need to do everything we can to build a more resilient city. We have a fair that is supported by our District 2 Supervisor, Catherine Stephanie, where you can learn more about NERT, you can learn more about ways to build your own community so that we can continue to look out for one another, take care of one another, and make sure that when the next one happens, we are all prepared to be safe and to be secure and to continue to have a strong, more resilient city for future generations to come. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. And last but not least, we have a special treat, an incredible, incredible, incredible opera singer, Rihanna.
Pieta,